They found the first box on a Tuesday morning. Still smoking faintly on the porch, its cardboard edges charred like the crust of a marshmallow, roasted to long. Inside was a metal container, the size of a shoebox, engraved with a simple logo. Poop box. Your monthly delivery of justice. The smell hit before they read the label. A searing, chemical stench of burning. Excrement and gasoline that made Emma gag and stumble backward. Beside the container was a note in familiar handwriting mine. Miss me yet? Don't worry. There's more where that came from. Subscription renewed for 12 months. The memory of that handwriting must have hit them hard. I imagine my son, Chris, crumpling the letter in his shaking hands, jaw tight, while his sister, Emma, stood frozen, unable to process whether it was a prank or a curse. I wasn't there to see it, of course. By then, I was 3 states away, drinking coffee in a motel room, watching the morning news with my feet on the table. I'd always said I'd find a way to be remembered. I just never said it'd be fondly. To understand how I ended up sending flaming dog poop to my own kids, you'd have to go back a few years to before the divorce. Before the lawyers, before they turned my own blood against me. There was a time when we were a normal family, or something that looked enough like one for the neighbors not to ask questions. Sunday pancakes, movie nights, sarcastic birthday cards. The whole routine, but families don't break apart overnight. Itapon! Quietly like rot setting into the beams of a house. It started with the whispers. Dad's losing it. He's not taking his meds. He's paranoid again. They talk behind doors. But doors don't block much when you've spent 20 years listening to people's lies for a living. I was a claims investigator for an insurance firm back then. Lying was my business, sketching it, dismantling it, exposing it. Maybe that's what broke me. Or maybe it was when Linda, my ex-wife, started calling me Ed only when she was angry. Edward, stop yelling. Edward, you're scaring them. Edward, you need help. The last one stuck. She said it in court, too. They told the judge I was unstable. That I'd threatened to burn down the house after the custody ruling. That I had herchildren ding twyden twantoer. I didn't threaten anyone. I told them the truth. That betrayal has a way of looping back around. That guilt burns longer than firewood. They thought I was being poetic. Maybe I was. But poetry becomes prophecy when no one listens. When the judge granted Linda full custody, I didn't cry. I laughed. Out loud. The sound filled the whole courtroom like something feral had escaped my throat. They said I'd snapped. Maybe that was the moment. Mes premiers. Just realized that I'd lost the only people who still pretended to know me. I spent the next few months in a haze motel to motel, bottle to bottle. Then I got an email. A marketing blast from some ridiculous novelty company selling revenge by mail subscriptions. I remember thinking it was stupid. Then I thought about Emma's face the day she told me she didn't want to see me anymore. I didn't want to hurt them, not really. I wanted them to remember, to think of me every month like some haunting they couldn't unsubscribe from. So I called the company, made a few customizations. I had contacts, after all. People who owed me favors, people who didn't ask questions. I sent them the message template, the delivery schedule, even the brand of dog food I wanted used for consistency. I paid extra for personalization. Sir, the rep had said over the phone, her tone wary. You understand that this is, technically considered a prank service, right? Like, novelty-level humor? Oh, it'll be hilarious. I told her. They'll die laughing. The first shipment went out the day before Emma's 21st birthday. Première imaginée d'air. Unwrapping it in front of her friends, that split second where her smile froze, trying to decode whether it was a joke or an attack. Chris would have known immediately it was my handwriting. He'd remember every letter I'd ever written him. I'd made sure of that. After the first box, I didn't stop. I expanded the service, automated, prepaid, 12 months at a time. The messages grew darker, more cryptic. Little riddles, half-truths, things only they would understand. Check under the porch, one said. You missed a piece. Another. The fire's not outside anymore. I wasn't threatening them. I was educating them. Teaching them what fear feels like when it wears a familiar face. Somewhere along the line, the police got involved. I saw it on the local news. Mysterious harassment campaign targets family. They used words like unhinged, vindictive, mentally unstable father. I won't deny any of that. But then found me. They never traced the packages back because I hadn't sent them myself. The company handled the logistics and the payments came from a debt account I'd set up years before. Still, guilt isn't something you can unsubscribe from either. I'd lie awake some nights staring at motel ceilings, wondering if Emma cried when she got them all, if Chris finally burned the boxes out. Back, I wondered if Linda ever blamed herself. Sometimes I'd almost pick up the phone. Then I hear her voice say I need help, mon passé. I moved again, got a job under a different name, started telling people I was widowed. But one day, a package showed up at my door. No return label. The same cardboard, same engraving, poop box. I froze. For the first. I trembled. Inside was a smaller, metal container, perfectly wrapped, with a note on top. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. The handwriting wasn't mine anymore. It was Emma's. Subscription renewed. Thought you'd miss the smell. I sat there for a long time, the matchbook in my hand, realizing that my little lesson had finally been learned. Maybe too well. The motel smelled like gasoline. And smoke for days. The fires at Dadipaksedan. Ring. That's one believe. Because maybe that's the real legacy we leave our children, not love, not lessons, but the way our madness teaches them how to fight back. And somewhere, far away, another box was already on its way. By the time the third package arrived, they had stopped pretending it. Pardon? Emma called the police again, but even the officer on duty sounded tired of the whole thing. Ma'am, he said, his voice dulled by routine, unless there's a direct threat or physical harm, there's not much we can do. It's disgusting, sure, but technically it's legal. Think of it as harassment by subscription. Chris was the one who picked up the box that day. He carried it into the backyard with a pair of tongs, holding it at arm's length like it might explode. Same company, he muttered, same logo, same smell. He kicked it into the fire pit, grabbed a bottle of lighter fluid, and watched the flame catch with a violent whoosh. There. Over. Done. Emma didn't say anything. She was staring at the small note that had fallen loose from the lid before it burned. Just a single sentence. Type this time. It only ends when you learn why. She didn't show it to Chris. Not yet. That night, she sat alone in her room, the note on her desk beside a photo of the four of them from years ago back when Dad still smiled in pictures. She traced the letters with her thumb. There was no return address, no signature. But there was something about the phrasing, something too deliberate to be random. She knew her father. He loved puzzles. He taught her to read between the lines, to find patterns where others saw chaos. Why? She whispered to the empty room. We what? That was when she noticed it beneath the typed sentence, faintly visible under the glare of her desk lamp, an embossed symbol. Atini. Flame. It wasn't part of the paper. It was pressed in, like a wax seal that had been stamped without ink. She rubbed her thumb over. It wasn't smooth. It was rough, almost gritty, burned. Downstairs, Chris was watching TV, volume turned low. The house had grown quiet since Mom moved to her sister's place. She said she needed space, but everyone knew what that really meant. The smell of smoke had sunk into the walls, and every time a truck rumbled by outside, she'd flinch. She told them she'd come back when things calmed down. That had been 3 weeks ago. Emma went to the basement later that night. The air down there was stale, thick with dust and the faint tongue of gasoline from the lawnmower. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, maybe some remnant of him. She remembered Dad keeping old boxes down here, files from his job, notebooks full of his chicken scratch handwriting. Cherche. Been forbidden to touch them growing up. Private, he'd say, slapping her hand away. That's not for you. Now, standing in the damp half-darkness, she realized most of the boxes were gone. Only a few remained, stacked in the far corner, one of them labeled C. Hartman Claims Archive. She dragged it out, coughing as a puff of dust rose. Inside were folders, hundreds of them, all stamped with insurance case numbers. She flipped through fire damage, arson, property fraud. But then she saw one that made her stop. Claim number 8829, the Parkerson residence. She remembered that name. It had been the last case her father ever worked before the breakdown. She remembered overhearing fragments of his phone call something about evidence being buried, payouts that didn't add up, and they think I won't find out. He'd been obsessed. The claim summary was simple. Total loss due to house fire. 2 fatalities. Suspicious cause. She kept reading, flipping through the handwritten notes. Accelerant inconsistent with fire origin. Insurance payout cleared in 6 days. Witness statements redacted. And then, at the bottom, in her father's handwriting, Linda involved. Kidnosaf her blol. Upstairs, Chris heard the creak of the basement, steps, and called out, "Em, you down there?" "Yeah," she said, voice trembling. "Come see this." He came down with his phone flashlight on, the beam cutting through the dim. She handed him the file. He skimmed the notes, frowning deeper with every line. "What the hell is this? His old case?" she said. "Look at what he wrote." Chris read the final note aloud. Linda involved. "Kid's not safe." He shook his head. No, that's just him being paranoid again. "You remember how he was?" "Do I?" Shushud back. "Because the guy who raised us wasn't always crazy. He became crazy. Maybe because of this." She pointed to the last page, where another note had been scrolled sideways. Asterisk, asterisk, if something happens, it's not an accident. Don't trust what she tells you. Asterisk, asterisk, Chris closed the folder. Face pale. "You think Mom did something?" "I don't know." "But doesn't it bother you that she left right when this started?" "Bother me?" He laughed, hollow and tired. "Emma, I'm bothered by everything, right now. But Dad's dead, and Mom's terrified, and we're burning boxes of crap every week, like it's normal. So, yeah, I'm bothered." There was silence between them. Only the soft hum of the old freezer filled the air. Then Emma said quietly, "What if the boxes aren't from him? What if they're from her?" Chris's head snapped toward her. "That's insane. Is it? Look at this." She pulled out another folder from the box. One labeled D. Hartman, supplemental, investigation. Asterisk, asterisk, inside were photos, burnt wood, melted plastic, charred remains of a house. And in one photo, near the corner of the frame, stood their mother. Younger, expression. Unreadable, watching the ruin. The date on the photo was 6 months before their father's first breakdown. Chris stared at the photo, mouth slightly open. "Jesus." Emma whispered, "He wasn't trying to scare us. He was trying to asterisk warn asterisk us." The sound of shattering glass from upstairs made them both jump. They froze, listening. Another crash followed, and then the heavy thud of footsteps across the living room. Chris grabbed the metal poker from beside the furnace. "Stay behind me." They crept up the stairs, the air thick with tension. The front door was still locked, but the side window above the sink was shattered inward. Glass glimmered on the floor. The curtains billowed faintly in the night breeze. And sitting neatly on the counter, where the morning mail usually went, was another box. This one wasn't smoking. It was sealed with black wax, and on top, instead of a note, was a small, scorched photo of the two of them as children covered in soot, edges burned. Emma's hands shook as she reached for it. "It's him," she whispered. "It has to be," but Chris didn't answer. He was staring past her at the faint light outside where a car engine idled quietly in the dark driveway, headlights off. And for the first time, they both realized something chilling. Whether it was their father or their mother behind the boxes, one of them was still out there. The sound of the idling engine outside felt like a pulse, steady, mechanical, alive. Chris inched toward the window, careful not to step on the broken glass. The porch light flickered twice, then went out entirely, plunging the kitchen into shadow. "Chris." Emma's voice was small, brittle. "Don't." He didn't answer. He lifted one corner of the curtain and peered through the narrow slit. A dark sedan sat at the end of the driveway, half hidden by the overgrown hedge. He couldn't make out the plates, but he could see the faint orange tip of a cigarette glowing inside the cabin. Someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching. He turned back to Emma, whispering, "There's someone out there." Her face drained of color. "Call the police." "With what?" he hissed. "You smashed your phone last week, and mine's dead." The power's flickering too. He looked toward the counter. The box still sat there, untouched, its black wax seal glistening faintly in the dim light. Don't open it, Emma said quickly. I'm not planning to, he muttered, though his eyes betrayed the temptation. The thing radiated a kind of sick gravity. It wanted asterisk to be opened. The porch creaked outside, slow, deliberate steps. Someone was approaching. Chris, Emma whispered, clutching the counter's edge. We should hide. He shook his head, jaw tight. No, whoever that is, they've been watching us for weeks. Amdanang was first. Almost poorly, then it came in harder. Chris. He froze. That voice. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. Mom, they looked at each other. Open up. Linda's voice called again. Please, it's me. Chris ran to the door and unlatched it before Emma could stop him. The porch light flickered once more, casting his mother's face into sharp relief. Pale, trembling, eyes red-rimmed. Her hair was wet, her coat disheveled, her expression stretched thin between fear and exhaustion. Mum, Emma said, stepping forward. What are you doing here? What? Don't touch that box, Linda interrupted. Her voice sharp and breathless. She pushed past them into the house, slamming the door behind her. Chris blinked. You asterisk no asterisk about it? Of course I do, she said, scanning the kitchen like a hunted animal. He told me this would happen, Emma frowned. Who did? Linda turned slowly toward her, and for a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator. Then he whispered, Your father. The words hung in the air like smoke. He's dead. Chris! Say flatly. You were at the funeral. I thought he was, she said. I wanted to believe he was. But the letters didn't stop after the coroner called. They got worse. She swallowed hard. He planned for this. Every month, a new message, new. Instructions. Emma stepped closer, her voice trembling. Instructions for what? Linda's gaze flicked to the sealed box on the counter. For you. Predicted his own death and kept mailing us crap from beyond the grave. Linda didn't answer. She was staring at the wax seal, her hand trembling. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unrolled it on the table, a tarnished silver lighter. I found this at the storage unit last week, she said quietly. It was sitting on top of a stack of his old files, and there was a note with it. Same handwriting, he said. He said, if I ever saw the flame symbol again, I had to burn whatever came with it. Emma's stomach twisted. That symbol was on the last note. Linda nodded, her face pale. Then we have to burn it, now. But Chris moved between her and the counter. No, not until we know what's inside. Chris, please. He shook his head. We've been guessing for months. I'm done being scared of cardboard. If this is really from him, if he's trying to tell us something we need to know, before anyone could stop him. He grabbed a kitchen knife and sliced through the black wax. The seal broke with a hiss, releasing a faint chemical odor that made Emma's eyes water. He lifted the lid. Inside was a small wooden box, lined with black velvet. Resting on top was a single Polaroid photograph, a house engulfed in flames. Beneath it, a folded sheet of paper. Chris picked it up carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Asterisk, you were right not to trust her. Here's a few Tiana and ever was. Check under the floorboards, basement, far wall. Before she does, asterisk, Emma looked up, her heart pounding. Before asterisk, she asterisk does? Mom, what is he talking about? Linda's face went rigid. He's lying, but her voice cracked on the word. Chris stepped back, clutching the note. You knew something. You've asterisk, always asterisk known. I was protecting you. She shouted, tears in her eyes. You don't know what he was capable of. And you don't know what you sound like right now, Emma whispered. He said you were involved in that old case. That you... I didn't light that fire. Linda snapped. I just helped bury what was left. The words hit like a slap. Chris's grip loosened. What the hell does that mean? But before she could answer, the house went dark. Every light, every hum, every flicker, gone. The silence that followed was so total it pressed against their eardrums. Then, from somewhere beneath their feet, came a sound like wood shifting. Or something crawling. Emma's voice was barely audible. The basement. Chris grabbed a flashlight from the drawer. The beam wavered as they descended the stairs again, each step creaking louder than the last. The basement air was colder now, the shadows thicker. They reached the far wall, the same spot where Emma had found the old files earlier. Chris knelt, running his hand along the floorboards. He said asterisk under here asterisk. He pried one, loose with the knife. Beneath the plank was a hollow space. On incidit some burlap. He pulled it free, heart hammering. It was heavier than he expected. He tore the fabric open, revealing a rusted metal box with a padlock snapped clean off. Inside were stacks of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small, scorched cassette tape. The top clipping local family decent arsonist fresterisk. The photo beneath it showed a younger Linda, standing beside a man who wasn't their father. Emma's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Chris lifted the cassette. Written across it in black marker were 3 words. Asterisk asterisk play this first. Asterisk asterisk, but before they could move. Before anyone could even breathe. Upstairs, the front door slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed across the floorboards above. Them, and then came a voice, come. Familiar. I told you, it said. You should have listened. The voice was unmistakable. Gravelly, deliberate, low enough to vibrate in their chests, like the echo of a nightmare that never really ended. Emma's breath hitched. Dad. Chris froze mid-step, the flashlight beam trembling in his hand as it swept across the basement ceiling. Just traîner done. 8 étages slow above them. The boards creaked. The sound came closer to the basement door. That's not possible, he whispered, shaking his head like denial could make the words true. He's dead. We saw the report. The footsteps stopped. Then came the metallic click of the basement latch. Linda stumbled back, her face white as salt. Aujourd'hui. Je muterai. He said he'd come back if I didn't. She didn't finish. The door opened. At the top of the stairs stood a figure. Not a ghost, not quite a man either. His silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the thin silver of the moon through the broken window. He wore a coat too large for his frame, his outline hunched and ragged. His voice carried down like a whisper. Dragged across gravel. You kids always did love digging through my things. Emma's knees almost gave out. Dad. He stepped forward slowly, each tread a quiet drumbeat against the steps. You shouldn't be here, he said. None of you should have come back. Chris raised the flashlight toward him, and for a moment, the beam caught his face. He wasn't a corpse. Vite. Looked close. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, his beard overgrown, skin mottled like it had seen too much fire and too little daylight. His right cheek bore a faint burn scar, the same side that had been turned away, in the funeral photo. Linda whispered, You died. I saw your body. They showed me. Edward Hartman smiled. You saw what I wanted you to see. Silence swallowed the basement. Chris found his voice first. You faked it? Edward's eyes flicked to him, unreadable. Faking things was always my job, wasn't it? False claims, fraud, paper trails. I learned from the best. His gaze shifted to Linda. She flinched as if struck. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, he said softly, descending another step. The present en accident. You and your boyfriend made sure of that. 2 people burned alive, Linda, and then you came home, kissed our kids, and acted like it was all business as usual. Emma's mind reeled. That can't be true. Mom, tell him he's lying, but Linda's. Silence said enough. Edward's smile faded. I tried to expose her, tried to make the company reopen the case, but she had Frachfulon. When I started talking, they made sure I went quiet. Paid off a coroner, staged a cremation, filed a certificate, neat little ending. The kind people, like her, specialize in. Chris swallowed hard. So the boxes, all of this, why? Why torture us? Torture, Edward laughed softly. No, son, preparation. Preparation for what? He stopped at the bottom step. His shadow stretched across the floor toward them, for the truth. You had to see it yourselves. You had to understand what she was capable of before you ended up like them. Linda's voice broke. You sick bastard. You use them like pawns. Use them. Word closer. A bright wheat. Fury. You think you didn't. You turned them against me. You made them believe their father was a lunatic while you covered your own tracks. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears. Stop it. Just stop it, she shouted, voice cracking. You're both insane. None of this makes sense. It will, Edward said quietly. Once you hear what's on that tape, he pointed to the cassette, still clutched in Chris's hand. Linda lunged toward him. Don't you dare play that. But Chris was already moving. He sprinted toward the old stereo, on the shelf by the furnace, one of Dad's relics, still plugged in through a dusty extension cord. He jammed the cassette into the slot before anyone could stop him. A moment of static. Then a voice, faint, recorded through distortion, filled the room. If you're hearing this, it means she found you first. She say I'm the monster. She always does, but the fire was her doing. She wanted the money, and she didn't care who had to burn for it. Don't let her bury the truth again. The evidence is under the foundation. Find it before the tape cut off in a burst of hiss. Then came a sharp, metallic sound, like a hammer being cocked. Emma Tourned. Linda was holding a gun. Put it down, Edward said softly. She was shaking so hard the barrel wobbled. You don't get to twist this, Ed. You don't get to come back and destroy what's left of them. They deserve the truth. They deserve peace. She screamed. You think they can live with what you did? What I did? You ruined everything. You were supposed to stay dead. The silence that followed was unbearable. 3. Heartbeats caught in the web of something too big. 2. Poisonous to name. Then Edward stepped closer. You burned those people, Linda, but you didn't just kill them. Yo qui les dues. And now it's time they decide who really lit the match. Her hand tightened on the trigger. Don't come closer. He took another step. Don't, but he didn't stop. The shot cracked through the basement like thunder, ricocheting off concrete. Emma screamed. Christ bled. Back, nearly dropping the flashlight. Edward staggered once, twice, and crumpled to the floor, a dark stain spreading beneath him. The silence after the shot felt longer than time itself. Linda's hand shook violently. He left me no choice, she whispered, voice hollow. He would if he always. Emma was crying now, kneeling beside her father. Dad, please, but Edward wasn't gone yet. His fingers twitched, finding Emma's wrist. His voice came out ragged, wet. Foundation. Check the foundation. Then he went still. Chris's breath came in harsh bursts. We have to call someone, he said. Mom, we have to, but Linda was already climbing the stairs. No one's calling anyone. Mom. She turned, face shadowed. Do you think anyone will believe you? A dead man, an old case, a crazy story. About boxes and ghosts. You'll destroy yourselves chasing this. Do you understand me? She disappeared up the steps. Her footsteps receding, the front door slamming moments later. Chris and Emma sat there in the basement, surrounded by the smell of smoke, gunpowder, and old secrets. The cassette still hissed in the stereo, the tape spinning uselessly. And then, under the noise, so faint it could have been imagination, another voice bled through. A whisper layered beneath the static. It's not over. The whisper hung in the basement, like a breath that refused to die. Emma froze, her eyes locked on the stereo. The faint hiss of static pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Chris, she whispered. Did you hear that? He swallowed hard, his voice hoarse. Yeah, I did. They stared at the CZ deck as the tape kept spinning empty now, the tail end flapping in the reels like a dying moth. But every few seconds the whisper came again. Not quite a word, not quite a sound, but something. Alive beneath the white noise, then the lights flickered back on the sudden. Brightness made Emma flinch. The whole basement was washed in the sterile yellow of the overhead bulb, revealing the scene in full. The gun on the floor, their father's still body, the dark slick of blood seeping into the concrete cracks. Chris turned toward the stairs. She's gone, he said, voice trembling. Mom's gone. Emma didn't answer. She crawled toward the stereo, hands shaking as she pressed the stop button. The reel halted, and the basement fell silent again. Then clicked the deck, ejected the tape on its own. The cassette slid out halfway, as if pushed. Emma stared. Did you? I didn't touch it. Chris said something was written on the other side of the cassette, scrawled in fresh ink that hadn't been there before. The words were uneven, jagged play. Side B. Chris took a step back. No way, this is insane. Emma picked it up with trembling fingers. He said the truth was under the foundation. Emma, I'm not leaving without knowing. Before Chris could stop her, she flipped the cassette over and slid it back into the deck. The speaker hissed again, then clicked. Edward's voice returned, faint but unmistakable. If you've made it this far, it means she tried to stop you. Good, you'll understand why soon this isn't just about her. It's about all of them, the people who paid for the fire, who buried it. It goes deeper than insurance, deeper than any of. U.S. The sound of rustling papers followed, as though he were reading something. You'll find a hatch beneath the center beam. I sealed it with concrete after they started watching me. Break it open. The evidence is inside the contracts. The names, everything. Burn it when you're done, or they'll come for you next. Static swelled, swallowing the voice until only one final sentence cut. Through cold and distant, remember Emma, it always starts with fire. The tape stopped. Chris ran a hand through his hair, pacing in small, frantic circles. This is nuts. We need to get out of here. Call the police, call anyone. Emma didn't move. She was staring at the concrete floor. The center beam, her father had mentioned the basement, had a thin crack running across it, hairline, but noticeable. She dropped to her knees, brushed aside the dust, and felt something, a ridge, faint, but solid. There's something here. Don't. She grabbed the hammer from the tool rack and swung. The first hit echoed like a gunshot. The second cracked the cement. On the third, the floor gave way, a small section collapsing inward to reveal darkness beneath. Chris shone the flashlight into the gap. There was a metal hatch, half-rusted, with a circular handle. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped it and turned. The hinges screamed. In protest, a wave of musty air poured out, thick with dust and the sour tongue of rot. Inside, a narrow crawl space yawned open, and at the far end, something gleamed faintly in the beam of the flashlight. A box. Not like the others, this one was heavy-duty, military-grade metal with thick clasps. A government serial code etched on the lid. Chris's throat went dry. Jesus, what did he get himself into? Emma crawled halfway in and dragged it out. The box was cold to the touch. She flipped the clasps open. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes, each marked with a date and a name. Some she recognized, local politicians, insurance executives, a fire marshal. Others were strangers, and at the bottom lay another cassette. This one was labeled only with a single word: confession. Chris stared at it. You've got to be kidding me. Emma lifted it slowly. He wanted us dead. Chris naped. You saw him. He mum shot him. She cried. He didn't come here to kill us. He came here to warn us. Before he could argue, a loud crash echoed upstairs. They both froze. The sound came again. The distinct smash of something heavy toppling over Mom. Chris called out, his voice uncertain. No answer. Emma glanced toward the stairwell. The faintest orange glow danced along the walls. Chris. Je whisperai dur that. Smoke. The fire alarm went off upstairs. A shrill, piercing wail. Shit! Chris shouted. He ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time. Emma followed, clutching the cassette. When they reached the living room, the air was already thick with smoke. Curtains burned like torches. The smell of gasoline was everywhere. Mom. Emma coughed, scanning the chaos. The back door was wide open. Through the haze, she saw movement, a figure outside limping toward the woods, a red gas can swinging from one hand. Mom. Linda turned, once just long enough for the flames to paint her face. Her eyes were wide, wild, glistening with something like sorrow or madness. Then she disappeared into the darkness. Chris grabbed Emma's arm. We have to go now. They stumbled out the front door as the house began to roar behind them. The heat was unbearable, a wall of flame devouring the walls where they'd grown up. From the safety of the yard, Emma turned and watched as the roof caved in. Embers spiraling upward into the night, sky like lost souls. In her hand, the cassette felt heavier than lead. The label, confession, had begun to blister from the heat. Chris bent over, gasping. She's gone. The house is gone. Everything's. Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at the burning structure, her father's last words echoing in her mind. Italue? Starts with fire. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, faint, growing closer. And under the sound of the flames, she could have sworn she heard it again, the same faint whisper from the tape, threading through the smoke and the screaming wood. You haven't finished yet. The fire trucks arrived 20 minutes too late. By then, the house was a skeleton of itself, walls collapsing inward. Timbers shrieking as they split and fell, windows bursting with the sharp, wet pop of molten glass. The firefighters could do nothing but control the perimeter and watch. It burned down to its bones. Emma sat on the curb, wrapped in a grey wool blanket that smelled faintly of diesel and smoke. Her hands still trembled around the cassette clutched to her chest. The heat had warped its plastic edges. But the label was still legible. Confession. Chris stood a few feet away, arguing with an officer who kept glancing back toward. Inferno. I'm telling you, Chris said, his voice ragged. Our father was alive. He was here. You can't list him as deceased anymore. He came back tonight, the officer older. Tired, eyes half hidden behind a soot-dusted visor, exhaled, slowly. Son, I don't know what you think you saw, but the coroner's records were verified. Your father was cremated 2 years ago. He wasn't. Look, you've been through a shock. Your mother's missing, your house burned down, and you're covered in soot. Let's focus on getting you to the hospital, all right? Chris slammed, his hands against the hood of the fire truck. He was alive. The officer didn't flinch, and now. Chris's mouth opened, but the words didn't come. He turned, eyes searching for Emma. She didn't look back. She was staring at what remained of their home. The air shimmered with heat. Carrying that same acrid scent, she remembered from childhood, the scent that haunted her father's clothes when he came home late from investigations. When she was 10, he'd once told her that every fire speaks. You just have to know what language it burns in, he'd said. Some scream, some whisper. Some keep secrets buried under the ash. Tonight, the flames whispered her name. The hospital was fluorescent and hollow, the kind of place where everything smelled sterilized, but nothing felt clean. They were treated for minor smoke, inhalation, and shock, then given adjoining rooms. Chris didn't talk much after the fire. He lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling tiles, replaying the night over and over. Emma, though, couldn't sit still. The cassette sat on her nightstand beside the hospital-issued water cup. Every time she looked at it, she felt the same cold pulse of dread and something else, curiosity. At 3:12 a.m., she gave in. She slipped out of bed, unplugged the hospital's small DVD player from the wall-mounted TV, and crouched beside it. On the floor. The machine had a cassette slot. It wasn't meant for audio, but the mechanics were the same. She slid confession inside. The screen flickered to life, static. Then, slowly, an image emerged, a dimly lit room, probably a basement. The air in the recording seemed thick with dust. The camera was fixed on a metal chair bolted to the floor. A woman sat in it, hands bound behind her, head slumped forward. Emma's heart stopped. Even through the blur and grain, she recognized the woman instantly, her mother. Linda's voice came faintly through the speakers, half choked, half sobbing. Please, Ed, you don't have to do this. I'll tell you everything. Just please. The camera jolted slightly. Edwards, almost standard. You had your chance to tell the truth. I gave you years. Now you'll tell them. You're insane. Say it. Linda, tell them about Parkerson. Linda shook her head violently. Edward Siged, Hishawal. You burned the Maliv for money. See, it wasn't Shiska. It wasn't a sudden flash, the sound of a match striking. The screen flared orange for half a second, then went black. The audio continued, distorted now. A rush of sound, fire crackling, something toppling, Linda screams dissolving into a single, awful note. Then silence. The video ended. Emma sat frozen, the hum of the hospital, lights loud in her ears. Her skin crawled with cold. She wanted to eject the tape, to fling it across the room, but then she noticed something. The team stamp at the bottom corner of the video feed. It wasn't from 2 years ago. It was dated for days ago. She felt her breath leave her body. 4 days ago meant after the boxes started arriving again, after the first resubscription. Her hands shook as she pressed rewind. The tape word Audacity deed of the screen-like frame for another recording. Spliced into it. Just a few words, burned into the analog, static. The fire never ends. It spreads. Morning came grey and washed out. The doctors discharged them by noon, recommending counseling, police interview. Chris refused to speak to anyone. He walked like someone who'd aged 20 years overnight. Emma packed the cassette in her backpack and followed him out. The police had cordoned off the property where their house once stood. Just a blackened pit now ringed with ash and melted debris, but as they approached the edge of the lot, she saw something she hadn't expected. A package, small square, wrapped in wet cardboard, sitting in the dirt, near the mailbox post. Chris saw it to know he whispered no, no, no. She was already moving toward it. Emma, she ignored him. The package was burned at the corners, the cardboard, soft and sagging, but the logo on the side was still visible. Poop box. Her stomach turned. She tore it open with her bare hands. Inside wasn't the usual metal container. This one held a small flash. Drive sealed, in a plastic evidence bag on the bag, was a note typed neatly on cream paper. It's time you delivered the fire. To no signature. But the handwriting on the back of the note, the looping scrawl of a single added word, was undeniably her father's play. That night, in a cheap motel outside of town, Emma sat cross-legged on the bed with her laptop open. Chris was in the bathroom, washing the soot off his arms again, like it could somehow scrub away what they'd seen. The flash drive blinked once when she plugged it in. It contained a single file, Hartman_continuation.mp4. Her finger hovered over the mouse. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen, pale and hollow-eyed. Then she clicked the video, opened with a low hum, a ceiling fan turning lazily above a desk. The camera panned downward to show a figure sitting in the shadows. A familiar voice spoke. "Hello, Emma. I knew you'd make it this far." Her father's face came into view, alive, calm, his eyes sharp and clear. "By now you know what your mother did, what I did, what we both set in motion. But there's one more thing you don't understand. Feeds. The next, you were never meant to stop the fire, you were meant to carry it." He smiled, a quiet, hollow smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your first package arrives tomorrow." The screen went black. And then faintly her laptop drive words. Something was downloading. Chris came out of the bathroom, still wiping his hands on a thin motel towel, when he saw the light from the laptop reflected on his sister's face. "What is it now?" he asked, voice hollow. Emma didn't move. On the screen, the download bar crawled forward, slow and steady, percentage numbers ticking upward on their own. The file name changed every few seconds. Emma_1 to MP for then, Emma_2 to MP for then, upload, ready.zip. "I didn't start this," she whispered. "It's doing it by itself." He dropped the towel and crossed the room. "Pull the plug." "I can't. It's not responding." He leaned over her, hit the power button. Nothing. The fan inside the laptop roared like it was overheating, and the cursor began to move across the screen by itself. Clicking open folders, typing lines into the system prompt, synchronizing. "Subscription. Recipient E. Hartman. Status active." Chris swore and slammed the lid shut. The laptop clicked, but the fan kept spinning. The blue glow seeped from the gaps around the keyboard like a pulse. Then, from the parking lot outside came the sound of tires on gravel. Both of them froze, headlights cut. Across the thin motel curtains, the car idled just long enough to fill the room with light before the engine died. Emma whispered, "We didn't tell anyone where we were." Chris went to the window and pulled the curtain back. A finger's width, the dark sedan sat there. The same kind they'd seen outside the house. No one got out. "Lock the door," he said. Emma did. The old metal bolt slid across with a dry scrape. Then a new sound joined the silence, the faint, rhythmic tapping of fingers against a phone screen coming from her laptop. She lifted the lid again. The screen was still black, but letters began to appear as though someone invisible were typing into a chat window. "Ready to begin. Next delivery." She typed, "Who is this?" A pause, then sender confirmed. "Welcome back, E. Hartman." Chris's face went white. "Emma, step away from that thing." She did, trembling. The cursor blinked twice, then began to type again, verifying target addresses. "Shut it off," Chris shouted. He yanked the plug from the wall. The screen stayed lit. The words kept appearing. "First pas tomorrow night, destination CHRIS at 6. Hartman. The air left the room. Emma whispered, "It's me. It thinks I'm him." She. The laptop slammed to the floor, the casing crud, but didn't turn a decanter active. Then came a tone, low and electronic, almost like a heartbeat. The motel lights dimmed. The power cut out completely. Chris stumbled toward the door. "We're leaving now." They grabbed what they could and burst into the night air. The parking lot was empty except for the sedan, its windows black. When Chris tried to peer inside, something moved slowly, like a shadow, turning its head. A single ember glow flared behind the glass, then vanished. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Come on!" They ran past the office, down the gravel road, through the field beyond, until the motel lights were gone behind them. Only when they reached the thin strip of woods did they stop, gasping. Chris doubled over, hands on his knees. "Okay," he said between breaths. "We call the cops." "Or FBI, somebody." Emma shook her head. "We show them what?" "A broken laptop, emails from a dead man." He looked at her. "You've got that tape?" "The flash drive." "The confession." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket. The tiny LED still blinked faintly, even though it wasn't plugged in. "Jesus Christ," Chris muttered. The blinking sped up. "Throw it," he said. But she couldn't. Something about the pulsing light drew her in. Hypnotic. It wasn't random. "It was steady, 3 short blink, 3 again." "SOS," she whispered. "It's Morse code." "For what?" She stared at the flash drive, then slowly turned it over. Etched into the plastic casing, barely visible, were 3 letters, FBI. Her heart thudded. He wasn't just exposing her. He was working with them. Chris frowned. Then why would... The flash! Drive beeped louder. A tiny click came from within, followed by a thin trail of smoke. Emma screamed and hurled it into the dirt just before it burst apart with a crack. A quick flare of light that left a perfect black scorch mark on the ground. They both stumbled back, shielding their eyes. When the smoke cleared, something gleamed in the ashes, a sliver of metal, no larger than a coin, engraved with the same flame symbol. Chris knelt beside it, staring. What the hell is that? I think, Emma said softly, it's the real subscription key, before he could respond. There. Phones buzzed simultaneously. Both screens lit up at once with a new notification, no app name, no sender ID, just a single message. Delivery confirmed. Thank you, Emma. The phones vibrated until the batteries died. By morning, they had made it 3 towns over. They hid in a diner, off the highway, eating pancakes that tasted of cardboard and fear. Every television in the place was tuned to the same news channel, a breaking report. Fire crews are still battling a blaze at the Sleepy Pines Motel just outside of Millerton. All 8 rooms went up in flames early this morning. No survivors have been confirmed at this time. The camera panned over the blackened ruins. Emma's mouth went dry. One of the firefighters on screen was carrying something in a plastic evidence bagger, melted laptop, still faintly smoking. On the side, visible for only a second before the frame cutaway, was the logo burned into the casing. Poop box. That night, they didn't talk much. The world outside their motel window was endless cornfields and power lines. Emma sat awake long after Chris fell asleep, her thoughts circling like vultures. At midnight, her phone buzzed again. No number. No raton. Juste. Same message lighting up the screen. Subscription renewed. Next delivery. 30 days. Below it was a link. Manage account. Her thumb hovered over it, heart hammering. Then, without fully meaning to, she tapped. The screen went white, and text appeared 1 letter at a time, as if someone or something were typing directly into her mind. Welcome, Emma. Your first delivery was a success. Ready to continue. Your father's work? A loading bar appeared beneath it, pulsing. And just before the screen went dark, she saw the final line. Target, Linda Hartman. Somewhere out there, her mother was still alive, and the fire hadn't finished burning. The next day bled in without light. The air outside their window had that grey weight that came before, rain or something worse. The world smelled faintly of wet ash. Chris was still asleep, sprawled sideways across the motel bed, one arm hanging limp off the side. Emma sat in the desk chair, phone still in her hand, eyes burning from the sleepless night. The screen had gone dark hours ago, but every few minutes she woke the display just to be sure. The message stayed there, patient and waiting. Target, Linda Hartman status, pending activation, she'd have. Convinced herself it was a hallucination, the brain's cruel way of holding on to trauma. But when she checked her email, the confirmation was there too. A clean, official-looking invoice. Thank you for continuing your service. Ms. Hartman, your next shipment will dispatch from facility number 09, estimated delivery, October 15th. She clicked the contact link at the bottom. It led to a domain that didn't exist. When Chris woke, she didn't tell him right away. They drove for hours south, she thought, though she wasn't sure. Gas stations blurred together. At one stop, she bought a prepaid phone, dumped the old one in a trash can. But by the next town the message had reappeared. New phone, new SIM, same words. They found another motel by dusk. Different wallpaper, same humming air conditioner. Chris stared at the news channel again, while Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open. I need to know where these shipments come from, she said. Poop box, Hartman Logistics, whatever name they're using. Chris didn't look away from the screen. You think you can hack a fulfillment service? I think I can trace it. Dad said everything started with the foundation. Meptis is what he meant. She typed for hours, fingers trembling over the keys. The company website was shallow of front, like the kind of fake e-commerce shell her father used to investigate for insurance fraud. But buried in the HTML code was an address, rural Kentucky, an industrial park. Chris leaned over her shoulder. You think they're still operating there? There's only one way to find out. He rubbed his eyes. We can't keep chasing ghosts. Every time we dig, something burns down. She turned to him, her voice low. Then we find out who's lighting the matches. They reached Kentucky by dawn. The address led them down a road that seemed to forget where it was going. No signs. No mile markers, just endless fields and telephone, wires that sagged like tired veins. Finally, the Jeeper stuttered and froze. Ahead stood a chain link, fence topped with barbed wire, a faded sign bolted to the gate. Hartman Logistics Private Property. Chris laughed once, dry and humorless. He named a company after himself. Of course he did. The padlock on the gate was already broken. Someone had forced it recently. Inside, the facility looked abandoned, corrugated. Metal walls rusted through, weeds pushing through the cracks in the asphalt. But near the center of the yard stood one building still intact, its windows blacked out. They approached slowly. The front door hung half open. Inside, the air was stale, smelling of paper, metal, and something faintly chemical. Rows of work tables filled the space. On each one sat neat stacks of cardboard boxes, identical to the ones that had arrived on their doorstep months before. Labels already printed. Shipping, schedules pinned to corkboards. Every label bore the same branding, poop box. Monthly, subscription of retribution. Emma moved between the tables, reading the addresses. Each was different names she didn't know, hundreds of them. Chris whispered, "It's not just us." At the back of the room, an office door stood ajar. A soft electronic hum came from inside. Emma pushed it open. The room beyond was small, lit only by the glow of a dozen computer monitors. The screens were filled with data delivery routes, subscriber IDs, payment records. And there, sitting in the center of it all, was a server tower. On its front panel, a single symbol glowed red. The Flame. Chris stepped closer. Do you think? The nearest monitor flickered, and a familiar voice filled the room through the speakers. Welcome back, Emma. Her breath caught. I knew you'd find me here. You've always been like me, curious, relentless. Dad, she said. Not exactly. The voice was his, but it had that hollow resonance of something digital, reassembled. Before I died before she killed me, I made backups. My notes, my voice, my memories, they learned how to use them. The company grew from there. Retribution as a service. The speakers crackled. You've inherited the system. It responto. You'll never know. The subscription belongs to you. Emma stumbled back. I don't want it. It doesn't matter what you want. The fire needs a caretaker. Chris grabbed her arm. We're leaving, but the door behind them slammed shut. The monitors began flashing. Lines of code filled the screens. Initializing next delivery. Target, Linda Hartman. Dispatch confirmation required. Why, Emma screamed. Stop it. Error. Human input required. The screen blinked twice. Waiting. Chris slammed his fist against the power button on the server. Sparks flew. One by one the monitors went black except the central one, where her father's face appeared. Faint, static shrouded. You can't kill what's already burned, Emma. You can only spread it. The lights went out. When Sherwook, the silly was silent. Smoke drifted through the broken windows. The smell of burning plastic filled the air. Chris was gone. The server lay in melted ruin. Dozens of boxes around her were scorched but intact, their labels still legible. She staggered to her feet and stumbled outside, coughing. The sky above the fields was red with dawn, firelight. She couldn't tell. In her pocket, her phone buzzed once. A new message. Think of confirming dispatch package en route. Recipient, Linda Hartman. Her hands went cold. She hadn't touched anything. Or maybe she had. Maybe the moment, she shouted. Stop it! The system had taken it as a command. In the distance, beyond the field, she saw smoke rising thin, black, familiar. Her mother's town was only 20 miles away. By the time she reached it, sirens were already screaming. The house small, white, the one Linda had fled to was engulfed. Firefighters stood in the yard, shouting orders, their faces lit by the blaze. Emma stumbled through the chaos, her voice raw. Ma'am, where is she? A paramedic grabbed her arm, tried to pull her back, but she broke free and ran toward the flames. Through the cracked front window, she saw movement of figure inside, arms raised, silhouette haloed by orange. "Mom," she screamed. Then the roof gave way. The fire swallowed the sound. Later, after the embers cooled, someone found her sitting on the curb again, soot on her skin, eyes wide and empty. In her lap lay a box, charred, but unopened. The label read, "Subscription complete. Next renewal, 30 days. And beneath it, scrawled in handwriting she didn't recognize, were for new words. "Every fire needs fuel." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and something else hot plastic. Printed paper, and far away, the echo of a new delivery truck starting its engine. The morning after the fire broke, everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skull, that makes you wonder if the world stopped spinning while you slept. Emma sat on the bench outside the hospital, wrapped in another grey blanket, watching smoke rise over the hills in the distance. It wasn't from her mother's house anymore. The crews had put that blaze out hours ago, but the smell lingered, clinging to her hair, her clothes, the back of her throat. Chris was gone. No one could tell her how or when. The paramedics had said he was seen helping one of the firefighters, but when they cleared the scene, there was no record of him, no name on any list. Just a single glove found near the truck bay, burned around the fingers. Inside the hospital, a nurse asked if Emma wanted to call anyone, if there was family. She shook her head. She didn't have an answer that made sense anymore. A detective tried next. He wanted to know about the string of fires, the missing mother, the evidence in the Kentucky warehouse. She told him the truth, every terrible piece of it, but the look he gave her was the kind reserved for people who'd seen too much. They found nothing at the warehouse. No computers, no boxes, no trace that anyone had operated there in years. Even the foundation had collapsed, as if something underground had hollowed it out and swallowed everything whole. So she stopped talking. Days passed. The official reports called it an accident electrical malfunction. Fortiwiring's Foundation. The local news ran the story once, briefly, then buried it beneath weather updates and human interest fluff. But late one night, in the dim light of the hospital corridor, a custodian brought her a small parcel. No return address. Justernam handed it at its first. She just stared at it, that single weight on the bed beside her. When she finally tore the tape away, she found no metal box, no ashes. Only an envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper. The subscription has ended. The account is closed. Thank you for carrying the flame. Beneath the words was a tiny, stamped emblem. No fire this time, just a circle of soot smudged like a fingerprint. For the first time in weeks, Emma cried. Not the shaking, frantic sobs that had racked her after the explosions, but something quieter, something closer to release. She left the hospital before dawn, walked until the city thinned into fields again. The air smelled clean, almost sweet, and for a while, she could almost believe it was over. At the edge of an empty field, she stopped, knelt, and set the letter on the ground. She struck a match and watched it burn slow, curling, the paper folding into itself until it vanished completely. The last ember winked out in the dirt. She waited. No new message, no delivery truck. No voice from the static, just silence. She stood, brushed the ash from her hands, and turned toward the road. The horizon was grey but brightening, a thin pale line where the night had finally run out. And as the first light of morning reached her face, she whispered to no one, "It ends here." Behind her, the wind carried the faint smell of smoke, but it was only the farmer's field, not fire. The world kept moving, small and ordinary and unburned. The flame, at last, had gone out.